To the next round for the official opposition, MPP Sattler.
Thank you very much, Chair. I want to go back to the issue of the underfunding of the sector, the challenges that institutions are facing with regard to their sustainability, and the impact of the loss of international student tuition dollars. We know from the Council of Ontario Universities earlier this year, there were at least 10 Ontario universities projecting operating deficits for 23-24. They reported it's a combined total of more than $175 million deficit, growing to $273 million in 24-25. So that was that number. The 10 universities in deficit situation is unprecedented, really, in this province, and is likely to increase. We also know from Colleges Ontario that the publicly assisted colleges are projected to see a decline of $1.7 billion in revenue because of the new federal rules around international students. So we have a rapidly changing federal landscape with the international study permits and the work permits. There's a lot of upheaval and people are trying to respond quickly. But I'm interested in hearing from the ministry if you can tell us how much international student tuition revenue has been lost at Ontario colleges and universities this year compared to the international student tuition dollars that were collected last year before the federal changes.
Absolutely, and you've mentioned the federal changes. You know, we're disappointed, as are the stakeholders, both the college sector and the university sector, that they made a unilateral decision after making a cap or an allotment in January, and 8 months later they've adjusted that cap when they promised 2 years of the cap on international students. But I believe it's a little too soon to be able to provide the numbers for this current school year, but I'll provide Deputy Way some time to provide those details.
Thanks, Minister, and thank Chair David Way, excuse me, Deputy Minister. Just so I understand the question, you're talking about 23-24 compared to the going forward year of estimates, 24-25 in comparison?
Yeah, how much was lost this fiscal versus last fiscal?
This current fiscal, 24-25. How much do we estimate?
Yes.
So as the Minister said, we only have very early data in terms of enrollment for this academic year. It's very early in the term. It's still October. Courses can be dropped and students can drop courses all the way to November. So we do not have final numbers or even close to early numbers, quite frankly, from institutions around their enrollment. And so we continue to monitor and get some initial information from institutions. So it's difficult at this point to understand what the full economic, fiscal impact will be from a revenue perspective in the current academic year.
But it will be significant. I mean, we have Colleges Ontario saying that it's going to be $1.7 billion in revenues lost. So across the sector, it's going to be a huge amount of revenue that institutions will have to try to look at how on earth they're going to be able to replace that. I had mentioned that we have at least 10 Ontario universities that are projecting deficits for 23-24. Can you tell us how many institutions currently? Is it 10 universities? How many colleges are reporting financial difficulties due to this? You know, this combination of the chronic underfunding, the loss of international student tuition.
So part of the $903 million, as you are well aware, I mentioned earlier, $203 million is for top-ups for higher-risk institutions, including those 10 universities that you mentioned. 3 of those universities are receiving an increase of 15% to be able to make them whole and financially stable, as well as 7 universities are receiving an increase of 10% based on their 2023-24 base funding numbers. But I'll provide the deputy some more time to further expand.
Just to clarify, so every university that is currently projecting a deficit is receiving some funding from that new pot of money?
This would have been based on their 23-24 base level, so it would have been last year's numbers that we're looking at.
Okay. I want to sort of understand the historical context that brought us to this moment with these federal changes, and it goes back, as you know, Minister, to 2019, and your government's decision to reduce and then freeze provincial funding to the sector, and the tacit or even explicit encouragement to colleges in particular to look at international students as an alternative source of revenue given the underfunding from the province. We had the Auditor General writing a series of reports warning about the impact of this decision, cutting that public funding, giving no replacement funding, and opening the doors to these arrangements with international private partnership, the public-private partnerships that resulted in the skyrocketing rate of international student tuition. So my question is, why did the government not listen to and act on the recommendations of the Auditor General that were made in 2022 and in other reports that could have prevented this over-reliance on international student tuition that has caused such financial instability in the sector at this moment?
So as I mentioned to MPP Clancy, the international students are filling a void. We have a significant skills and labor gap in the province of Ontario, as does the rest of Canada and North America. And those students are being able to come in and allow the province to be able to grow the way we want it with some of the projects, but ultimately with the skills gaps in healthcare, skilled trades, and STEM, the international students are part of the solution to be able to get us out of some of the labor shortages we're currently in. So I will pass it over to the deputy to provide further context on that. But prior, I will mention that we do have the $15 million Efficiency and Accountability Fund that's there to ensure that all institutions are working as efficiently as possible so that they can ensure that public dollars are spent wisely.
Okay. I actually did appreciate the Deputy Minister's earlier response to my colleague MPP Clancy. So I'll just move on to another question about the impact of the loss of international student tuition and the underfunding of the sector, which is cuts to programs. So we saw earlier this spring, Fleming College announced that their 29 additional programs were going to be suspended. That means there's been 42 programs at that college that have been suspended in a little over a year. The Fleming College administration said that this was directly related to lost revenue from international tuition, but the problem is, Minister, when you talk about being responsive to labor market needs, some of the programs that Fleming College is being forced to cut directly lead students into jobs that are in demand in our labor market. Those are the programs that are being put at risk. So my question with regard to these the estimates that we have before us, is there anything, any vote items in the estimates that would help colleges and universities keep their programs operating despite the loss of international student tuition? And will you be updating the estimates in light of the additional changes that you referred to that the federal government just announced on the caps to the international study permits?
So at this point, it's too early to be able to comment on the changes the federal government just made about a week and a half ago. But ultimately, I will go back to our $903 million investment with $700 million across the board increases over the next 3 years for all institutions, as well as the top-up fund of $203 million, upwards of 10 and 15% for those institutions of greater need. But I'll pass it over to Deputy Way to provide further context.
Thank you, David Way, Deputy Minister. Just to reiterate something, so it is up to the individual colleges and universities to decide on how they run their administrative and academic matters and which programs they choose to adjust or expand. Those are within the college and universities to decide, and be responsive to their local communities. There are different needs in different parts of the province, and they need to be responsive to the particular areas. So we do leave that to individual institutions to sort that out for their particular community and what is most relevant to the community. I think the other point I would raise is the $15 million efficiency accountability fund that the minister has already raised. It's really an opportunity for institutions to think about how they go about operating their institution. As the Blue Ribbon panel talked about, there's lots of opportunity for efficiency within the sector for both administrative efficiencies and other opportunities, IT, back office type things, to ensure that the institution is running effectively and efficiently and able to fund those programs for their students.
Yeah, I understand from representatives from institutions in the sector that I speak to that the choices that are being made are not being made on the basis of labor market need. They're being made on the basis of the lack of funding that's coming from the provincial government and the financial hardship that they're experiencing because of the federal changes. But Colleges Ontario has said that the programs most at risk are those high-cost programs that addresses workforce needs across this province in technology, healthcare, skilled trades, some of the things that the minister has already talked about. So this is a concern when Fleming is predicted to be the first of many colleges that will be in a impossible situation of having to decide which workforce relevant programs they're going to have to cut because they can't afford to deliver those programs anymore because they don't have the international student tuition subsidizing the delivery of those programs. But I just wanted to, you're new in the role, Minister. You have learned a lot in the short time that you have been serving. But I really like to know how you feel about the fact that Ontario ended the 23-24 fiscal year with a nearly balanced budget, but that was in large part due to the increased revenue from international students at Ontario colleges because those dollars at Ontario colleges are consolidated on the government's books. Minister, do you see any kind of moral issue here when the government is able to balance its budget because we've been bringing in unsustainable numbers of international students who are paying exorbitant fees to attend our institutions? So the first question is, do you think that this is right and ethical? The second question is, how will adjusted consolidated revenues work in future years when there is reduced international student revenues and the impact that will have on government's future spending?
Absolutely. So for the almost balanced budget, I'm very proud of the Ministry of Finance and Treasury Board because there's multiple factors that come into balancing a budget and or having a surplus or deficit. And it's not just one factor that's going to bring them close to balancing the budget. So our fiscal responsibility, I'm extremely proud of our government in that. You did touch upon the Fleming, and I think it's important to note that part of our SMA 3 process and SMA 4 that's coming forward has a Made in Ontario performance-based funding model that's been designed to link a portion of post-secondary operating funding to the outcomes. Part of those outcomes, the areas, the priority is skills and job outcomes and economic and community impact. So whenever institutions that are completely standalone institutions make those decisions, that may result in some differences in their SMA score ranking moving forward because it's about skills and job outcomes and the economic and community impact, and that will be part of SMA 4 moving forward. But I will pass it over to Deputy Wade to provide further context on your question.
I think actually that was a great response, Minister. That provides the context that I'm looking for. I want to go to the issue of student housing, and you've already responded to some questions about that. But when we were at this committee last year doing the estimates, that your predecessor, the former minister, told us that the government was engaged in a consultation on student housing. But we did not get any information about who in the sector was being consulted. As far as I am aware, there has been no public report issued. There's been no summary released about what was heard during that consultation. So my question is, will the government be I guess it's two parts. First, has the consultation been completed? It's been a year since the minister talked about it, but will a report be released publicly on the results of that consultation?
Absolutely. So last summer, the ministry did consult with colleges, universities, and other sector stakeholders to better understand what barriers are to providing, accessing student housing. Ultimately, we're still gathering some of that information. As MCU, we've worked with MMAH to develop part of the new provincial planning statement and related policies that will require planning authorities to collaborate with post-secondary institutions on student housing. All colleges and universities will be required to publish student housing policies publicly to ensure that students have access to and awareness to student housing options that are safe, affordable, and with an easy commute to campus. In addition, MCU is collecting student data that will be used by MMAH to track Ontario's housing targets. This data will also help MCU and the sector better understand the current state of student housing in Ontario, but I'll pass it over to Deputy Wade to provide further detail.
You mentioned the importance of student housing that is affordable, and one of the things that I have heard in talking to people in the sector, particularly at colleges when they are building student residences, but they actually have vacant spaces because they can't offer the residence rooms at a price that can compete with some of the frankly quite deplorable conditions that students often have to live in. The cost of a residence room is much more expensive than the cost of sharing potentially a kind of a boarding house off campus, and that puts students at great risk. So I'm wondering if your ministry is planning any other strategies that would include an investment in purpose-built student housing that would actually make it affordable for students to choose those housing options when they're attending our colleges and universities.
So I fundamentally disagree with your comments that there's vacancies in the residence because of the price affordability. Students do come with different backgrounds and demographics. Some of them in our college sector are 23 on average or older, and they may have a family, they may have commitments in the community. But understanding that supply and demand in our community does make a difference when it comes to student housing and the affordability of student housing. So I had mentioned earlier, we almost have 3,000 units that have come online since 2020, about 1,500 of those being at our college sector, which historically has had lower amounts of student housing. We are taking a whole government approach, working with the Ministry of Municipal Affairs and Housing to try to remove some of those barriers for the university sector, like the college sector has on the planning and the costs and time frame associated with that.
Thank you, Minister. That's all for this round. We'll now go to MPP Clancy. You've got 10 minutes.
Okay. Thank you. I know it might feel like a broken record, but I think it's really important to bring focus on the funding gaps. It is really what we hear in every conversation we have with students, staff across Ontario. So just to reiterate, right now Ontario ranks 44% of the average for their college funding across Canada, and for universities, Ontario is at 57% of the national average. You know, when we think about the Blue Ribbon Panel and the money that was invested and the expertise gathered to give the government recommendations, what's the plan to follow through on those recommendations?
Well, I think the plan is that we invested a historic $1.3 billion over 3 years. Obviously, the Blue Ribbon Panel was released in the fall of 2023, and just in the spring or winter, if you have it, we made that significant investment of $1.3 billion, including the $903 million in the new post-secondary education sustainability fund, including $203 million of that in top-up funding for institutions with greater need, as well as, you know, part of the Blue Ribbon Panel was to ensure that colleges and universities, publicly assisted college universities, are working as efficiently as possible. So we've also topped up $15 million over 3 years through third-party reviews to ensure that we drive long-term cost savings and positive outcomes for students and ultimately the communities that they serve.
I guess the feedback I think you've probably heard is that it's not adequate, that it's a short-term relief, that it makes it look like you're doing something, but it doesn't address some of these deep, critical issues. What's your response? I know there's numbers to say, but the feedback is still that's only a short-term relief, that the gap and the stress, the financial stressors lead them to shortchanging a young generation.
So I guess my comment is, you know, it doesn't look like we're doing anything. I think $1.3 billion to the taxpayer is a pretty significant amount of money that we've invested into our post-secondary education system. But we also want to make sure that those institutions are efficient, and that's why that extra $15 million, a part of the $1.3 billion, is going to ensure with third-party review that the outcomes for the students and the communities they serve, which is the most important part of why we have the the post-secondary education system, is to ensure that our students and our communities thrive.
Okay, I'm not hearing that from our experts, but that's okay. I don't disagree that it's a significant investment. I guess I'm hearing that there's a lot of instability and insecurity in the sector.
I'll be honest, I'm hearing more from sector partners that the federal government unilaterally changed the goalposts in the middle of the game.
I mean, I don't disagree that doing it without collaboration and consultation was improper, but I do believe that our colleges and universities had to rely on international students to pay the bills. Like they paid more than you did for universities and colleges. So there has to be a bit of accountability and onus that we created a system that couldn't pay for itself. I do agree that we have labor shortages. I know that we have an aging population. We have gaps to fill. I was a settlement worker for 7 years. I deeply am grateful for people calling Canada their home. But I am a direct witness of the reliance on international students in a way that was not in the true spirit of it sometimes, and it was meant to fit a funding gap that was created by the cut and the freeze.
Again, with my human resource backgrounds, I say it's a skills gap, and we needed our international students to ensure that our economy can thrive moving forward.
I hope you tell that to our community, because I think a lot of neighbors don't understand that. And to me, when I go to the doors, I do have to pair it with the accountability of our government in underfunding our colleges. Again, 44% of the national average. So one of the other blue panel recommendations was about OSAP. The federal funding doesn't charge interest for 6 months after OSAP, after they graduate, whereas the provincial government does start charging interest right away. And there is feedback that we need to be increasing OSAP for folks who live in the north because of living expenses. Is that going to come at some point?
Before I let the deputy explain on that one further, I am very proud of the fact that 82% of all Ontario-funded assistance is the grants, whereas on the federal program, only 54% is grants and the rest is loans. But I'll let the deputy provide further context.
David Way, Deputy Minister. Yes, just to reiterate, the emphasis on the Ontario side is on the grants, is what I would say. I'd ask ADM Jeff Butler to come and talk further about that, because your comment around cost of living and related to OSAP is how we think about it is considered as we kind of go about the adjudication, understanding what the need is. And so maybe Jeff Butler can talk further about that piece.
Yeah, thanks very much. Jeff Butler, Assistant Deputy Minister, Operations Division. So as both the Minister noted, actually for the 2023-24 academic year, excuse me, about 85% of the support that was provided, Ontario's share of support was provided in the form of grants, and the federal government about 35%. And as the deputy said, that has been our focus. I'll just say a couple of other things about the loan portion of OSAP funding. We have seen significant declines over the last several years in loan balances at graduation for students. For example, for four-year university students, down from about $24,400 to about $17,200. We've also seen significant declines in default rates on our loans over the last 10 years, from nearly 10% in 2012 to about 3.6% in 2022. And just lastly, as I had mentioned before, we do have indexation within the program on the living cost amounts that we do recognize for students, as well as increases in the aid maximums that are provided to students.
Thank you. No, I do appreciate the amount that goes to grants. I appreciate that feedback. I hope we can see an increase in the north and those interest charges addressed. I just was curious too, like, what is the process? So let's say this year, because of international student rates dropping and a continued freeze and the low funding, more institutions find themselves in a difficult situation. Is there a bat phone? Is there a process? Is there a committee? Like, how is it that we're going to catch some of these program cuts or, crises before it's too late?
So every year our ministry does do a review of both the college and university sector to ensure that they're financially stable, but I'll allow the Deputy Minister to provide more context to that.
Thanks, Minister. David Wade, Deputy Minister. So we are in regular contact with institutions all the time from a financial perspective and understanding their particular financial situation. As the Minister articulated, we do have the University Accountability Financial Framework that we have implemented in 23-24 to get a better understanding of the financial situation of particular institutions. I may have ADM Josh Paul come and talk further about that. Similarly, on the college side, we do assess their financial situation based on both the historical and more recent kind of financials, as well as kind of ongoing discussions about their forward-looking situation. I think we are all kind of looking to understand the enrollment levels in international and help understand and facilitate that kind of discussion on the financial side of things, and help us address and make sure we're addressing before those situations happen, as you say, any financial weakness within the system of particular institutions. Maybe I'll pass it to
ADM Paul, you've got about a minute.
Josh Paul, ADM, the Financial Sustainability Performance and Oversight Division, and keeper of the bat phone. So I would just say, in addition to everything the deputy just laid out, the University Financial Accountability Framework, which regularly tracks financial health, as I've outlined earlier in this committee meeting, and the college submissions to us on their overall financial health that we track regularly. We are in constant contact with individual colleges and universities, but also the associations to ensure that we understand if there are any particular urgent issues in the field.
I guess, is there some way we can ensure that low enrollment, like classes that require a small number? Because I know, Psychology 101, we've all been there. It's 500 kids in a room, which, has its own challenges. But what about, I'm hearing from some of these really high complexity courses that can only handle a small number. They're not always regarded well by the government?
Sorry, MPP Clancy. Unfortunately, that's the end of your 10 minutes. We'll go to the government's final 20-minute round. MPP Pang.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, to the Minister. And Minister, it's great to hear that all the investment our government is making to build up our healthcare workforce. And while there is a need to build up healthcare capacity across the province, that is certainly felt more by some communities than the others. So could you please speak to the investments of our government is making to train healthcare professionals in communities that need them the most?
Thank you, MPP Pang, for another important question. We know that there are some communities in Ontario that have a harder time getting access to health care when they need, where and when they need it, including the north and the east and rural Ontario. That's why our government is taking concrete action to not only foster education in healthcare professionals, but also address specific regional and community healthcare needs in every corner of this province. This includes significant investments like the Ontario Learn and Stay grant, which provides students in priority health care programs with funding for school and incentives to work in underserved and growing communities like in the north. We're also expanding medical education for all Ontario medical schools, including the Northern Ontario School of Medicine, or NOSM for short, and establishing 2 new medical schools, Toronto Metropolitan University, or TMU, School of Medicine, and York University School of Medicine as well, just in your backyard. Our government is training more doctors to practice in communities that need them the most. And through new programs like the micro-credentials, our government is helping healthcare workers quickly upgrade their skills to meet the needs of local patients. I'll first speak about an initiative that I briefly touched upon on my opening remarks, but should be specifically highlighted for the way it's transforming the future of healthcare in Ontario. I'll start at the beginning. In 2021, this government introduced the Ontario Learn and Stay grant as part of the province's plan to stay open, a plan that was developed in response to the unparalleled challenges posed by the COVID-19 pandemic, which brought to light the many healthcare disparities across this province and Canada. With the commitment to making sure every region in Ontario had the necessary workforce to support its people post-pandemic and after, we created the Ontario Learn and Stay grant. This new grant will support the education of healthcare workers while bolstering the healthcare workforce, specifically in growing and underserved regions. This grant provides eligible students full upfront funding for tuition, books, and other direct educational costs like supplies and equipment, receiving anywhere between $5,000 and $10,000 per year, depending on the program. Eligible programs focus on meeting the healthcare needs of underserved and growing local communities in certain regions. Those include nursing programs in the north, eastern, and southwestern Ontario, medical laboratory technology programs in northern and southwestern Ontario, and paramedic programs in northern Ontario. That's the learn part of the Ontario Learn and Stay. The stay part of this grant is that students must commit to working in the region where they've studied after they graduate, committing to work 6 months for every year they receive the grant. This initiative is not only a career builder, but also a community builder. For example, if Taylor is studying at Cambrian's College 2-year paramedic program, receiving the Ontario Learn and Stay grant for both years, after graduation, their service commitment would be for 1 year, working in emergency services for any Northern Ontario community. And if Jordan is starting first year of their Bachelor of Science in Nursing program at St. Lawrence College, Kingston's campus, and receives the Ontario Learn and Stay grant for all 4 years of their program, they'll commit to working in Eastern Ontario for 2 years after graduation, perhaps as a nurse at Kingston General Hospital or the Children's Hospital of Eastern Ontario. As you can see, the Ontario Learn and Stay grant makes it possible for more students to pursue healthcare education without the added burden of financial stress. Students applying for the grant can also apply for the Ontario Student Assistance Program, or OSAP, as we've talked about numerous times today, to support costs not covered by the grant, like living expenses. This makes an even bigger impact on the lives of students who would not only be able to afford their education without support from the Ontario government. By providing targeted financial incentives, the Ontario Learn and Stay grant encourages students to learn and work in growing and underserved communities while addressing healthcare shortages in these areas. With more healthcare workers in these regions, residents can have better access to the care they need and deserve. In May of 23, the first round of applications for the Ontario Learn and Stay grant opened, and the response was overwhelming. We far exceeded our target of 2,500 recipients that first year, with 3,800 students receiving the grant. So far, this government has invested over $34 million directly into funding the Ontario Learn and Stay grant for these students, including 3,400 nursing students, nearly 400 paramedic students, and nearly 100 medical laboratory technology students, with their educational costs like tuition and books completely covered thanks to this grant. And we'll continue to support every eligible student and these priority healthcare programs in growing and underserved regions of the province. It will be a game changer for students and communities across the province, increasing access to post-secondary education while addressing local workforce needs, especially in underserved regions struggling to build and maintain their healthcare sector. As I mentioned earlier, and as Deputy Way mentioned in his remarks, Ontario's post-secondary institutions are training more doctors than ever before by investing over $133 million into the largest expansion of medical education in over 10 years. This investment will add undergraduate medical seats and postgraduate medical training positions to every medical school across Ontario, including both the Northern Ontario School of Medicine and TMU's new medical school to become operational in 25-26. For years, our government has been helping to grow the healthcare workforce in Northern Ontario with its continued support of the Northern Ontario School of Medicine, or NOSM. Since its inception in 2005, NOSM has been at the forefront addressing the unique healthcare needs of northern, remote, and Indigenous communities. The school plays an important role in solving the chronic doctor shortage in Northern Ontario, with many of its graduates choosing to build their practices in the region. Graduates like Dr. Sarah Newberry, a family physician working in Marathon, Ontario, who previously served as Chief of Staff at Marathon's Wilson Memorial General Hospital. Or Dr. Mike Curlew, who is known for his advocacy for Indigenous health at Sioux Lookout and for developing culturally appropriate models for healthcare delivery. Or Dr. Renee Ann Montpellier, who is leading the innovative virtual emergency department at Health Sciences North, breaking down barriers for people looking for emergency care but unable to travel those long distances. These doctors are among many NOSM graduates who are working to improve healthcare access for communities who have historically faced barriers in receiving timely and adequate care. In recognizing the important work that NOSM does to educate future doctors and build up Northern Ontario's healthcare workforce, the Ontario government is investing $1.7 million into NOSM in 23-24 for medical expansion initiatives, and continues to provide NOSM with a higher per student funding rate than any other medical school in Ontario. Also, as part of Ontario's historical expansions to medical education, the province is investing $56 million to add 44 undergraduate seats and 66 postgraduate seats to NOSM by 2028. These additional seats and positions will be crucial in increasing the number of doctors trained and ready to serve in northern communities. Another medical school I'd like to highlight is the one of the province's newest, York University School of Medicine. As I mentioned earlier, we're providing an initial investment of $9 million to kickstart the design and planning of this new medical school. The York University School of Medicine, located in Vaughan, is anticipated to include up to 80 undergraduate seats and 102 postgraduate positions starting in September 28, eventually expanding to 240 undergraduate seats and 293 postgraduate positions annually once fully operational. What sets York University School of Medicine apart is its unique focus. It will be the first medical school in Canada dedicated to training family doctors, with 70% of new postgraduate training seats exclusively devoted to primary care. Family physicians are the cornerstone of our healthcare system. They're often the first point of contact for patients managing everything from early-stage clinical problems and acute disorders to chronic diseases and emotional well-being. For communities in York, Simcoe, and Muskoka, which are currently facing doctor shortages, the new medical school will be critical in addressing the most pressing healthcare needs where they're felt the most. By investing in the planning of York University's new medical school and supporting the school once it's up and running, our government is adding to the province's healthcare workforce while making sure the fastest growing communities have the right supply of physicians for years to come. For both of these medical schools, NOSM and York University, I want to raise another important point. Statistics show that doctors generally stay in the region where they complete their postgraduate training. By increasing postgraduate positions at NOSM, we'll see more graduates continue to live and practice in rural and northern Ontario. Similarly, the new medical school at York University will help ensure that doctors stay and practice in communities that need more primary care providers. Lastly, I'd like to talk about micro-credentials. It's another way our government is building up Ontario's healthcare workforce by expanding opportunities for healthcare workers, especially in rural, remote, and underserved communities. Micro-credentials are rapid training programs created through partnerships between post-secondary institutions and local industry. For healthcare workers, these programs are designed to help them upgrade their skills quickly and efficiently to thrive in our ever-evolving healthcare sector. This year, we're investing another $5 million into the Ontario Micro-Credentials Challenge Fund, a call for proposals program to fund projects that accelerate development of micro-credentials and expand program offerings. We're also providing funding for 88 micro-credential projects at colleges, universities, and career colleges and Indigenous institutes across the province. Projects like the Oshkosh Wenjack Education Institute's micro-credential that provides Indigenous learners with training to enhance their role as community health representatives and to better serve Indigenous patients. Or Lakehead University's series of 5 micro-credentials that address gaps in specialized skills for healthcare workers in northern, rural, and remote communities. By empowering healthcare workers to quickly upskill in areas that improve patient care and wellness, these micro-credentials will provide healthcare workers with the tools they need to deliver care that is responsive to local patient needs, from urban centers to the most remote communities. All of the investments and programs I mentioned, the Ontario Learn and Stay Grant, the medical expansions in support of NOSM and York University's School of Medicine, and the Micro-Credentials Challenge Fund, are a testament to our government's commitment to addressing the unique challenges faced by remote, rural, and underserved communities, and our efforts to actively build up Ontario's healthcare workforce in places that need it the most. By strategically investing in education and training for healthcare workers, we are making sure Ontario's healthcare workforce has the skills and knowledge to continue growing, while providing exceptional care to all people in Ontario in every corner of the province, wherever they may live. Thank you.
MPP Bailey.
Thank you. It's an overwhelming file you've inherited, and I want to congratulate you, Minister, on being here today and with your ADM and everyone else that's here to support you. And it's 3 hours of listening to all of the vast information that's available and what your ministry, 2 ministries, are actually doing. Very, very interesting. I'd be remiss. I was with the president of Lambton College the other evening, Rob Cardis, president of Lambton College in my riding of Sarnia-Lambton, and he said, make sure you invite the minister down to Sarnia-Lambton. We want to have him come down here. We had talked about research. They're well known across the province and around across Canada as far as that goes. The research that they do at that college. They have about 4,500 students enrolled there just at the Sarnia campus. About half of them are domestic, the rest international. They also partner with C-Star College in Toronto, where they have a great relationship as well. They're accomplishing great things. So I do want to get that on the record that you're invited down there sooner than later. And I guess you've covered so many things. One thing I think we talked about earlier on, the first hour, about the needs of schools for maintenance. There's a gap in $6 billion. Maybe you could expand a little bit more on that if you wanted to have some more on the record about what you and your ministry are trying to accomplish there and how you intend to do it. And thank you again.
Absolutely. Thank you, MPP Bailey, for the question and also for being my parliamentary assistant on a new file. I am definitely leaning on you for some information and support. I don't know what to say after that. Safe facilities and modern learning equipment are the foundation for a high-quality education. Our government knows that students need access to modern learning facilities so that they can feel confident and that they are getting the best education and training. And we know that post-secondary institutions need our support so they can continue to deliver a safe and engaging experience for those on campus. That's why we have made several multi-million-dollar investments since we've been in office that are helping institutions address their maintenance backlogs, make necessary repairs, and modernize their facilities, all while improving their sustainability and energy efficiency. Over the next 10 years, we're making significant capital investments in the province, including $6.1 billion in the post-secondary education sector. And in 24-25 alone, we're providing $246 million to publicly assisted colleges and universities, which is more than double the 2019-2020 capital grant funding. Ontario's employers across sectors need access to a skilled pipeline of workers, and our investments are providing institutions with resources they need to properly train students for the evolving labor market. I want to take this opportunity to highlight 3 vital programs our government continues to invest in every year: the Facilities Renewal Program, the College Equipment Renewal Fund, and the Training Equipment and Renewal Fund, which will allow institutions to address their deferred maintenance backlog, undertake critical repairs, modernize classrooms, upgrade technology, and improve their environmental sustainability while continuing to deliver a safe experience for students. Thanks to our government's continued investments, the Facilities Renewal Program continues to grow and have a positive impact on institutions, students, and staff. The funding provided through this program helps publicly assisted colleges and universities maintain, repair, renovate, and upgrade their academic facilities. And while students and staff may not notice every upgrade, it is this very program that allows institutions to do the repairs that are vital to the safety of those that are on campus. For example, it funds major building upgrades, roof repairs, and mechanical and electrical system upgrades as well. Additionally, the Facilities Renewal Program supports accessibility-related projects. In 23-24, approximately 17% of all projects focus on improving accessibility at post-secondary institutions. And our government understands the importance of these upgrades and the impact they have on the students' lives. That's why the funding for the Facilities Renewal Program has tripled since 2018. And why, starting in 22-23, our government began investing $546 million in this program over 3 years. Ensuring institutions' facilities are safe is a priority for this ministry, as well as ensuring students are prepared for the workforce. The College Equipment Renewal Fund helps with just that. Established in 22, the fund helps our province's 24 publicly assisted colleges buy and restore the learning resources and equipment needed to deliver relevant hands-on training that will help build Ontario and our modern economy. That's why, starting in 21-22, we committed to investing $60 million over 3 years. And due to the tremendous success of the competitive stream, we have extended it beyond the initial 3-year pilot. Similar to the College Equipment Renewal Fund, we also have the Training Equipment and Renewal Fund for universities, which was created under this government 3 years ago. The workforce is constantly changing, and classrooms must keep up. That's why over the last 3 years, we've invested $30 million into this fund. When students have access to the best and latest equipment, more doors open and their job opportunities grow. With new computers and the latest software, students can train for the many rewarding careers in IT and software development, artificial intelligence, and advanced computing. And labs and shops with industry-grade machinery and tools prepare students for careers in booming sectors like the manufacturing and science, technology, engineering, and mathematics, or STEM for short. Both funds have a direct positive impact on students, preparing them for modern
Minister, you have 1 minute remaining.
workplaces, thank you, through the delivery of high-quality in-person and virtual learning. I'm proud to say that our investments in these programs don't stop there. Our government knows that rising construction and labor costs have made it challenging to do building repairs and updates. To address these challenges, in February, we announced $167 million in additional funding over 3 years starting in 24-25. This includes $90 million through the Facilities Renewal Program and $73 million through our 2 equipment and renewal funds. These types of investments will help improve our post-secondary institutions, which in turn will support our province's economy. Our government continues to invest in post-secondary infrastructure so that institutions' facilities can evolve with industry trends and build a qualified and adaptable workforce.
Thank you, Minister. So the final round for the official opposition won't be the full 20 minutes, but there is 8 minutes and 15 seconds. So MPP Fife.
Thank you. So you have spoken at length for like 3 hours now, which is a long time. I'll give you that. About the $1.3 billion to so-called stabilize Ontario's cash-strapped universities and colleges. I want to read you what. Well, actually, I'm going to say this. University of Waterloo is one of the best universities in the country, internationally well known, has one of the best reputations, especially around engineering and their co-op program, but they really are an outstanding institution. This spring, they let us know, the public know, and you know, that they have a $75 million operating deficit. So, and the $1.3 billion was offered over the 3 years as sort of like I guess in theory, some bridge financing. But a global credit agency, DBRS Morningstar, said this about the $1.3 billion, that the Ford government's 3-year $1.3 billion funding plan to stabilize Ontario's cash-strapped universities and colleges was a mere stopgap, okay? And then they went on to say that there is a fundamental lack of revenue for universities and colleges to conduct their basic operations. I mean, from the facilities deficit of $6.3 billion to the not being able to retain enough staff. University of Waterloo cited, the negative impacts of Bill 124 and the fallout for that. And of course, now we have another layer of pressure point for universities with the international students, which I have to say should never have been part of the financial cure for an underfunded post-secondary sector. The government's response, now this, to be fair to you, was before your time as minister, but the former minister went on to say that that universities and colleges could help bridge their budget shortfalls by finding efficiencies, okay? And I think some of us should know this by now, but you can't cut your way out of a structural deficit. I mean, it just does not work. So my question to you, Minister, is that, you gave several Ontario universities a mandate to perform third-party efficiency reviews. Is there any documentation that can be shared about these required reviews? And ultimately, do you just not believe universities are running efficient operations? What are you looking for with these efficiency reviews?
So I guess coming from small business, I recognize that all institutions or organizations could find efficiencies.
Do you think that colleges and universities are businesses?
They're institutions and organizations.
They are publicly assisted organizations. But I'm asking you, do you think that universities and colleges are somehow sitting on big pots of money that they're not investing in their capital or their programming or their operations?
So I guess I'll answer that by saying, not only do businesses need to worry about their efficiency, but also not-for-profits. I've dealt on numerous not-for-profit boards, and efficiency reviews are essential to ensure that dollars are spent well.
So this is really interesting. So you are saying, though, then you think that these universities and colleges somewhere have some fat.
I did
can
not
be
state
cut.
that. I'm stating that there's efficiencies to be had.
And what are those efficiencies?
That's what the review, a third-party review, will find.
you-
I'm not an expert in that.
And these are not small businesses. I also want to say.
And that's why I mentioned not-for-profits as well, because for some reason you discounted my small business comment. So not-for-profits also have to review their efficiency as well.
Chair, it is not a fair comparator. You as a small business with 2 employees versus universities with thousands.
Actually,
And
my
the
payroll is $1
ecosystem-
million a year,
and the
so thank you for that.
ecosystem, you're not. This isn't about you.
I
This
know
is
it's not about me. I'm
students
just getting you to understand that
in the
every
province of
organization needs to have an
Ontario.
efficiency.
And
Maybe this is a good time for me to interject and just remind everyone that we're dealing with estimates, and
Yes.
we just keep our conversation regarding the 2024-2025 estimates.
Yeah, let's talk
Go
about the
ahead.
money.
Go ahead,
Because,
MPP Fife.
but I do want to say, you have put out a call to colleges and universities across the province, and you've said find some efficiencies. We do know you cannot cut your way out of an operational deficit. Are you at least helping these universities and colleges with the cost of doing the review?
Yes, we have $15 million, part of that $1.3 billion investment that we put in this year.
So the insufficient $1.3 billion, which is not going to stabilize the sector, you keep referencing this money as if it's going to save the sector. What we know that the funding shortage that universities and colleges in Ontario face is structural and it's worsening. Do you want to see our institutions, continue down this path where they're not able to fulfill their mandate as institutions?
So there's a reason why international students want to come to Ontario. We have a world-class education system in Ontario.
That's a strange direction to go. What we do know about international students, Minister, is that when they were coming to Ontario, they were promised a certain level of education, they were promised a certain standard of living, they were promised the potential of reaching their potential as students, and all that happened for many of them. I mean, my colleague has referenced from Waterloo Region, from going 800 international students to 30,000. I mean, do you have concerns about that direction and that acceleration of having to rely on international students to make up for the funding shortfall that is the responsibility of this government?
So I think I've stated it before. I do believe the students are fulfilling a skills gap, a trade gap that we have, a skills trade gap, whether it's in healthcare, STEM, or skills trades. We need our international students and the skill set they bring to ensure that Ontario's economy can thrive.
Okay, so, University of Waterloo cited the negative impact of Bill 124 on their budget line, right? Just to recap, Bill 124 was an unconstitutional piece of legislation that this government brought in, and 1% at 3 years. This actually caused an out-migration of the very labor, skill set that you're complaining about.
MPP Fife.
1 minute?
1 minute left.
So your government brought in legislation which made the labor shortage problem in the province of Ontario even greater. By underfunding the post-secondary sector, you by default look to international students to make up that gap, and with no regulations on the amount of tuition that could be charged. Do you not see the connection with the actions that your government brought in with Bill 124 and the negative impact that it's had on the labor shortage issue and on the operational deficits in our post-secondary sector?
I believe the pandemic caused a lot of labor shortages right across every sector, and ultimately the international students will be able to help fill some of those labor shortages that we have across the sector. The pandemic really showed a lot of cracks throughout all of North America.
Well, the pandemic taught us some important lessons about valuing the very people that work in these institutions.
So thanks to all the members of the committee. I want to thank the minister and the deputy and all the staff at the ministry. I think this is the minister's second round of estimates. I think he sat there when he was Associate Minister of Forestry, so I'm not sure if that's a record for the government to have someone go through 2 different ministries. But just thanks for being here. This concludes the committee's consideration of the estimates of the Ministry of Colleges and Universities. So Standing Order 69 requires that I, as chair, put without further amendment or debate every question necessary to dispose of the estimates. Are members ready to vote? Shall vote 3001 Ministry Administration Program carry? All those in favor? Opposed? Carried. Shall vote 3002 Post-Secondary Education Program carry? All those in favor? Opposed? Motion carried. Shall vote 3005 Research Program carry? All those in favor? Opposed? Motion carried. Shall the 2024-2025 estimates of the Ministry of Colleges and Universities carry? All those in favor? Opposed? Carried. Shall the chair report the 2024-2025 estimates of the Ministry of Colleges and Universities to the House? All those in favor? Opposed? Carried. So this concludes our consideration of the estimates for the ministry today. There being no further business, this committee stands adjourned until tomorrow, October the 8th, 2024, when the committee will have public hearings for Bill 121. Meeting adjourned.